So I just want to mention that I'm just so grateful that I'm not having as many technical difficulties with this one. But why don't we just go ahead and get started, and then we will we'll be able to get going from the beginning. Okay. So hopefully everyone can hear me, and I'll check the chat in a few minutes to see if there's some bigger issue with folks hearing me. But I'm super excited about this topic. You know, I'm in politics and you know, kind of 501c3 work, and so I don't do a lot with leading in the UFO community, but I definitely have an interest there, and I've had a couple different like psychedelic events where I've had people speak that have done like movies on abduction, and people that have been at Skinwalker Ranch and things like that. So I definitely try to integrate different types of people who have different experiences to look at like esoteric knowledge, you know, from a psychedelic lens or whatever. So I welcome everyone, and I enjoy the Seattle UFO Society. So thank you so much for letting me speak. So this little talk is more about just like the orbs in general that I had been noticing people were talking about on the internet. And so I wanted to do just kind of a fun deep dive into like, well, what are these orbs that we're seeing? You know, what are they about? You know, not the drones necessarily that people are talking about, but the orbs that are being reported, as well as the drones in the skies. And I was looking, I think, for some esoteric meaning or hypothesis around that, because, you know, I am someone that's very open to like parallel universes, or, you know, I grew up on Star Trek and sci-fi. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. So I kind of made a joke with this little meme about like the woman who is the secretary for the fun guys that get to go out and do the ghost busting. I feel like I'm kind of like a feminist, so I'm like the secretary that says, you know, I don't want to be the secretary, you know, I want to be the leader. So I'm in politics, right? And I'm a leader, but I'm also into these things that I consider to be woo, which are, you know, things like ESP or esoteric knowledge or clairvoyance or things like that, because I like to listen to like psychics and things like that. So I'm esoteric and I'm political, you know, I'm just kind of a little bit of both. And when I'm coming from a background of psychedelic politics, I'd like folks to consider that from the perspective of, you know, it's kind of like the new human exploratory landscape of discovery. You know, it's like where people are going to these spaces. Hold on. Where people are going in these spaces, and where they're like traveling in these lands or these dimensions. And, you know, a lot of times people are having their psychedelic experiences, and they're reporting that they're having increased psychic gifts, or increased almost like ESP communication with people that they've done ceremony with, and or they'll like have increased, you know, just kind of clairvoyance, if you will, right? So it's like, what is happening in these portals, right? What is happening in these places where people are going? And I think some of the brightest minds are really wrestling with concepts around, you know, the simulation theory, which I would recommend. Rizwan Virk has written several books on the simulation theory, or there's other, you know, great scientists that have written books about multidimensional theories. And the concept that we are kind of like bleeding into one another. Are there portals within our concept of reality? Because we may have kind of a multi-stacked, multi-dimensional experience, you know, and not even know it, you know. And historically, within psychonaut culture, which is like psychedelics and people that have done exploration with psychedelics, there's this famous psychedelic explorer, which is like a psychonaut called Terence McKenna, who did a lot with reality and consciousness, right? And if you look at this funny cartoon, this is something associated with a Terence McKenna site, but it's literally got this weird alien that is like on a one-wheeled little like bicycle thing, and they're like the next evolution of humans. So I think there are definitely people within psychedelic culture that have kind of said, wow, what's going on here with like UFOs or aliens, or, you know, people that have an interest in like a multi-dimensional world. So what I wanted to say about this is that, the time that we're in is a very, I think, rich time if we think about exploring reality, and that really it could be quite wonderful and amazing, even though it might seem bizarre, if maybe we find out, and we accept that time as we know it, or space as we know it, or consciousness as we know it, the world, the reality as we know it is maybe deeper and stranger and more bizarre than we could ever imagine, right? And we may get to a point in our human evolution where our religions are destroyed, or our sense of God and angels and aliens become kind of intertwined somehow, and that we're at this very poignant moment in human history where we could greet this as like an opportunity, right? And I think it's significant on a political level, as you see these politicians that are coming forward and whistleblowers that are coming forward that are talking about alien technology, talking about biologics, talking about reverse engineered technology. And so I think we're being forced to like grapple with some truths as a society that it's hard, because it means that we have to like embrace or accept that we don't necessarily have trust in our institutions, right? And that we're kind of seeing slow or maybe fast rates of disclosure. But there's going to be people around us, right, who for them, they've always purported that there's nothing here but us. The food pyramid ends with us. We're the enchilada. We're the big enchilada. There's nothing beyond us. And their concept of humans being kind of like the epicenter of the universe is going to shift radically if there's other intelligences, whether they're interdimensional. It could be that psychedelics are a form of intelligence from another dimension, but as we kind of like evolve in our own understanding and our own awakening, I think that there could be a lot to like grapple with as a society. And so I found myself, I was watching the news a lot recently with all the drone sightings in New Jersey, and then like all these weird things. I would watch hearings about the drone sightings, and I would watch contradictory messages from politicians about the drone sightings. And if you go on TikTok, there's a lot more about the orbs. If you research Dior bags, that's a term that's being used on TikTok right now to talk about the orbs and the drones in New Jersey and beyond. But during like this early December, I would say, I was like, this is so strange to me, right? Because these things aren't really fitting together. And there was a guy, and I'm going to show a slide later in this presentation, but he had asked Grok, which is Elon Musk's AI, what kind of like Grok thought was going on, and he fed Grok all this information about what people were saying, and Grok seemed to imply, and I'll cite this gentleman in my presentation, but Grok seemed to imply that the drones were like us or maybe some other aliens or whatever, but that we understood who was piloting the drones or who was sending the drones up there, but that the drones were more of a distraction from something that was like kind of like presenting itself as being beyond us, right? Whatever that means to you, whether it's angels or aliens or something. So I thought that was interesting that this gentleman said that that's what Grok was saying, which was Elon Musk's AI, about the drones being in the sky, that they were more of like a distraction, because then you can tell politicians can say, oh no, that's us in the sky, or we know what's going on in the sky, or we've got it under control, because they're not really lying, because they're talking about like the drones possibly. And then I had a woman, and I'm going to share her slide at the end, but she contacted me from Australia. She shared 4 different videos with me, all of the orbs, not the drones. So the orb is like it looks like an orb, and it almost seems like sentient. And I've seen videos where it's spitting out baby orbs. So if you go on TikTok, if you go on X, if you go on YouTube, you can find more about the orbs. But this woman contacted me from Australia out of the blue, and she was in one of my plant medicine groups, and she was like, hey, I saw that you posted something about the orbs. I just wanted to reach out to you. And she was answering questions for me that I was super curious, like what her emotional reaction was, what her like psychic third eye kind of intuition, women's intuition. I was less curious about what she saw, and I was more curious about what she felt, right? And then I fell into this guy, Clif High, and I just want to say, like, Clif High has a lot of, like, I'm Jewish, and Clif High has a lot of like anti-Semitic views on Jews running the world, and just he has all kinds of political stuff. But I consider him pivotal in this discussion because he was featured by Newsweek, and what he did was really phenomenal. And why I'm interested in Clif High is purely because he created a tool that I find quite fascinating. So I just want to differentiate my politics from Clif, while admiring the tool that he seems to have created, which is a tool that pulls on, it's an oracle, like the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece was like a woman, like a virgin that the gods had given all their power to divine and give prognosis about the future. Like she was the oracle for generation after generation and pretty much ran all of Europe for like centuries, right? Behind the scenes, she would give all the advice. And so this guy has created an oracle that's an internet oracle where he's pulling from data in a phenomenal way from all across the universe and listening kind of to the unconscious, to the ether of everyone's discussions. And then he's pulling from that timelines. And I'm going to go into this a little bit in a future slide, but the timelines each have a marker on them that indicates what timeline you're on, if that makes sense. And some of us are visual learners, so I definitely did a slide about this. And around this time, I also was noticing on TikTok, or maybe this was X, that Elon was almost like teasing the public when they were asking questions because he has all these, satellites in the sky and Starlink is pretty much everywhere. And so I couldn't quite sort it out, like, is he just being flippant or what? But he had made a post about the Matrix being updated and people not understanding, one, that we're living in a matrix, and two, that occasionally we get major software updates, and that's what he was referring to the drones, which I thought was interesting. So this was the gentleman that asked Grok, which is the AI technology that Elon has created, and his name is Tech Chasm, or I don't know how to pronounce that, but so you can go check him out on YouTube, TECHCHASM, and I think he's European. He's really funny, but he's always posting videos about the orbs, and I really find that interesting. And he was the one that had asked Elon Musk's AI, like, what do you think's going on? And fed Grok a bunch of information. And what came out was this idea that the drones are more like us, even if it's like bad aliens or something, but it's us. And the orbs are not us. The orbs are something else. And that really piqued my curiosity. And just for a little background, when I had mentioned Terence McKenna, it's like I'm over here in the psychedelic culture trying to get psychedelics legalized and things like that. When I wade into the UFO culture, I don't usually meet a lot of UFO people that are really fighting for plant medicine and going to meet with senators about plant medicine and legalizing plant medicine and running, town halls on plant medicine. But occasionally there will be like a Venn diagram where you will find people that are deeply into UFO culture and psychedelic culture and somehow seeing that the two kind of maybe has some strange overlay. And I'll get back to that later. But Terence McKenna is one of those people historically. I mentioned him earlier, that he was a psychonaut. He was considered to be like just a big deal in the psychedelic world or whatever. And he had made a famous quote about things he said before he died, I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder. And finally, it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. People are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's just too nuts. So he has this whole idea around novelty theory, which I kind of compare to the Mayan calendar. But it's the concept, I believe, of things getting like, it's more loosely organized and it becomes more tightly organized. And as we evolve, we are becoming more tightly organized. And then we hit like an epoch moment. And another person I recommend, so I recommend kind of checking out Terence McKenna's novelty theory, because I think it somehow he related it to aliens. But he's a major famous psychonaut in like psychedelic history. But also Rick Levine, who's from Seattle, and it would just be great to have him agree to do a talk for Seattle UFO Society. But I was watching this great YouTube with him yesterday, And he was talking about Pluto and Aquarius, which for those who are into astrology, the time we're headed now, we haven't had this in since the American Revolution or the French Revolution, which is a time of like breaking out the guillotines for the bourgeoisie. It's Pluto and Aquarius is very revolutionary energy. So I do recommend Rick Levine if you're into astrology and that's your thing and you're open to it, because he has some great stuff. And you can find that video on YouTube. So just for like a little history on like balls of lightning and things that we've been told about orbs, I started going back in like some early depictions of ball lightning, and I was like, you know, maybe it's just me, but it seems a little bit loopy and weird that like they're telling us, this is what science is telling us, is that these random balls of energy, that they're lightning energy, and they're just gonna like pop up out of nowhere, right? And I don't know, it just something about it just doesn't sit right with me, right? And I went on TikTok and I saw a lot of people talking about the Dior bags is the term they're using now. But also you can research this, but I think it's about 100 New Jersey mayors who did an open letter that I thought was very fascinating, where they said over and over, like they got together as mayors and kind of stood up against the US government and said, listen, folks, we don't feel like we're being listened to. We don't feel like we're being believed. We don't feel like we don't feel like people are paying attention to us, and we are not getting our questions answered, and we don't believe what the US government is telling us about these orbs. So I don't think that was covered a lot by the media, but I thought that was very interesting. Yeah, so you can go and research, but every mayor that signed on to this like letter or something were basically saying that the FBI was saying like, we're trying to figure out what's going on. So the FBI didn't seem to know what was going on. And they went through all these kinds of like fake little things where they said like, oh, we're going to get all the drones out of, tell people they can't do drones in our airspace. But it's like, these didn't seem to be like hobbyist drones. Some of them were as big as SUVs, right? And so this is a video that I highly recommend you guys go look at. We can try to look at before we end the talk today. But this is when things kind of cracked a little bit in the general kind of scenario of how we were looking at this, because this video was, someone took it outside of their plane. It was mainstream news that was covering it. And they were admitting that they were at such an altitude that there was no way that these could be drones at this altitude. And there were 3 orbs, really, that this person took a picture of that basically kind of like were next to the flight the entire way. So you can just look up like flight, I think from Chicago O'Hare, and the passenger took a video, orb video, Chicago O'Hare. But you can find this video very easily, and maybe we can look at it before this session is over. But when I looked around me, I saw different reactions to the orbs. I had friends that were like, I'm just going to ignore the whole thing. This isn't my problem. I've got bigger problems, right? And I thought, okay, but if it's really a big deal, like, wouldn't you have some curiosity? And then I had friends that were like, no, this is Project Bluebeam, and this is just a psyop, and they're trying to usher in a one world government with electronic money, and we're all going to have like social, credit scores and stuff. And then I had friends that thought the orbs were sentient angels from the Bible. And I'm Jewish, and I'm just using the term Bible loosely, but like any Abrahamic book that talked about angels being like those 2 rings with eyes. I don't know if anyone knows about those, but like historically, like angels were described as like 2 spheres with eyes, and they're just kind of like looping around each other or something. So in that way, they could maybe look like the orbs or something. And then I had friends that were really out there, and they were thinking that there was like an alien war going on the moon, right? So I just have lots of friends from lots of different diverse backgrounds. But I remember finding this one article I thought was interesting, that this seemed to be almost like a cover up. Like, what are they trying to say? Like, I feel like they're trying to say something, but they're not really saying it, right? So this article was from 2020, and it said ball lightning is so strange it might just come from another dimension. So before, we were being told the ball lightning shows up as a big orb, right? And it has to do with like lightning, right? And we're just supposed to be like, oh, it's like mathematical or it's scientific and we just can't understand it, but it's part of science and nature, right? And then they're counting this other concept of like, actually, guys, it could be from another dimension. And you're like, okay, I guess, you know, but the story keeps changing about these ball lightnings. And then we get to the concept of the temporal. Oh wait, not yet. Sorry. And then I was started to look at old paintings, right? Because I had friends that were really into the orbs from a perspective of thinking that they were angels. And they were like, did you look at these old paintings? And I was like, what old paintings? And they're these old paintings you can find that have like little globes with people inside them that look like they're driving little spaceships, but it looks like an orb, right? It looks like an orb. It's super funny because it kind of looks like an orb, and maybe angels existed, or the gods of yesteryear came down in the orbs, and you know, we don't understand because we're just like apes, and they're like us, like we're just like primates, you know, running around scratching our armpits. So, you know, I don't know, I just try to stay open to everything. So I remember when a friend sent this to me and I thought, oh, this is interesting. These, you know, star people, native people talk about star people. And so I find that native people have a different perspective often than other people about like aliens and stuff. Okay, so then Clif High, when I started digging into his AI Oracle thing, Newsweek kind of published this weird article, but they basically said that there's this computer scientist and linguist, that's Clif High, and he's from Washington State, ironically enough. So maybe you guys should try to get him to join a talk. But so he was speaking in this YouTube video in 2019. And he said that a temporal marker, and I'm going to explain what a temporal marker is in a minute, but on his trajectory of different timelines that is coming about as a result of the gathering information with the AI Oracle, he had a distinct temporal marker for 2019 that he said, if there is an interview between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump, that there will be like aliens in the sky within like 39 days, or, you know, orbs in the sky or drones in the sky or something. I think he felt like he was misquoted from the Newsweek article, but like whatever. So, so his AI Oracle is grabbing everything on the web, like the collective unconscious, and then making sense out of it by these timelines. And then from those timelines, he's gathering information. So like one timeline would have one temporal marker, another one would have another temporal marker, and he's just pulling information from like trends. And if you think about, everyone is having like maybe like a little psychic antenna on their head, or like a third eye, or a pineal gland, or, you know, we don't know how deep human consciousness goes. They say we only use like 10% of our brain. So like maybe we have this other knowledge or this other intelligence we're using. So I'm just saying it's interesting that he's pulling on conversations, because people can be talking about the most random things. But if you had the capacity, kind of like AI, or like a giant intelligent creature from another universe, like another species from another planet, you might have the capacity to listen in another way and hear all the chatter on the planet. Because sometimes people say like they've seen orbs around crop circles and stuff like that. And when people get asked like, well, why don't they come down and communicate with us? It's like, one, how do you know they're not communicating with you? Maybe they are communicating with you, but in a higher dimensional kind of way. And then two, maybe they're waiting for us to be ready, or for us to be cool with it. Do you know what I mean? Maybe they're just not trying to make a big introduction. So, you know, or maybe they've been interacting with us forever and we just kind of don't get it. So a temporal marker is going to tell us that we are on a specific timeline according to Clif High's AI Oracle. So those temporal markers tell us in his mind where we're going. And I know people have strong feelings about Donald Trump, especially in the Pacific Northwest, which was the one state I think that voted more blue this last election. Because I'm in politics in a bipartisan effort, I will work with Republicans. I'll work with anyone. So I don't mean any disrespect to Republicans, but I know in the Pacific Northwest, people have some kind of weird reaction to Donald Trump in general. And I'm just trying to look at him from a perspective of what is he saying, right? I'm super curious about what the guy is saying. And I thought it was interesting. He did this one press conference from Mar-a-Lago. I'm not sure if anyone watched that, But if you actually listen to what he's saying, it's really kind of trippy. He's like, the government knows what is happening. So, okay, so the government knows what's happening in New Jersey with these drones. Okay. And he says for some reason they don't want to comment. Okay, so they either don't know what they're going to do about it, they don't know exactly how to handle it, or they just don't want to tell the public for some reason. Okay, just kind of gathering some information from what I'm observing from what he's saying. And then he says, I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Okay, like, is he saying that he thinks the public can handle it and he's happy to tell the public what it is? Because what I've heard about the JFK file that he had told Joe Rogan that he was going to be willing to open up is that I've heard behind the scenes that it's not this poor excuse they give about how it's related to people that they want to protect, like in the military or the CIA or the FBI or things like that. I've heard that it has to do with like Marilyn Monroe and UFO disclosure and all this other stuff, because Marilyn Monroe was going to go public with the UFO information she knew from her affair with RFK Jr., RFK. And so my point is that it could be that he is going to be our disclosure president, right? Like, I feel like I'm a little bit psychic, and like that's kind of my gut feeling, like he's going to be the one, because this is all coming about, and maybe someone moved the timeline up, maybe the aliens moved the timeline up, but I don't know. I just read so much into this talk that he gave for the reporters. So then he says, for some reason they want to keep people in suspense. I'm like, okay. And then he says, I can't imagine it's the enemy. And I have so many friends that are like, oh, the drones are from China, the drones are from Russia, the drones are from North Korea, the drones are from Iran, whatever. But he does say something that's kind of critical. He says something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people, and they should. Because I think what he's implying is the people can handle it. And if it's not our enemy and it's not us, then really, who does that leave? And I just feel like more people should be paying attention to it, just by omitting who he's saying it's not. Now you can think that he's full of shite and not worth listening to, but I do find it interesting that this is his first press conference, and he seems to be almost implying disclosure here. Now that could just be me, but that's what I'm feeling. So I'm not saying that Clif High is accurate, but because I am fascinated by his timeline, I am very curious the things that he is predicting for this next year. And he is saying by like the 15th of September of this year, that the hyper novelty is going to double by the day, which is insane to me, because what he is saying is hyper novelty is like when people say they stand there on the corner and they're talking to their neighbor and they're like, I've never seen that blood red moon in the sky, or like a second moon in the sky, or I've never seen like a city in the sky like they saw in China or something. Like, hyper novelty is like very strange things that happen that you're like, why is this happening? This has never happened before. And he said he saw people having bankruptcies, like counties having bankruptcies or states having bankruptcies, but that there were stocks that are going to, like, people are going to find out they have more stocks than there actually are as something. Like, they're going to find out their stock is actually maybe not worth that much, and there's going to be a lot of auditing of stock companies and stuff. He also said there was going to be random violence, but it would be like false flag stuff or a crazy individual who's freaked out about aliens or something. It wasn't like the people are going to rise up and there's just going to be an overthrow of the government or something. He did say there were going to be shortages, like, and a level of histrionics we haven't seen before, but the shortages would be like goods and food and stuff like that. And he didn't seem to imply it was going to be like forever, just like people should have like 4 months of food and water on them. One thing that I found fascinating, and maybe it's just because I'm a poet, but he said a dog poet arises, like someone who's like the voice of the people. And the word dog poet just seems very, like, I don't know, symbolic to me or something. Like, it reminds me of like the Beatnik generation or Jack Kerouac, like, who is this dog poet, and are they speaking for a generation about this new world that we're entering into. Like, who's going to usher us into that new world? And you want to know another thing that is really, really interesting is RFK, sorry, I meant to say JFK earlier when I was talking about RFK. RFK Jr., for his Thanksgiving post for his like timeline to show his family at Thanksgiving, the only person that was not family for RFK Jr.'s family Thanksgiving was that white-haired guy. I think he went to Harvard, who's the attorney. He's the only alien UFO UAP lobbyist. I'm forgetting his name, but he has white curly hair and glasses. He's really smart. He was the only guest at their dinner, and they all posed together for Thanksgiving that wasn't family. And I thought, wow, this is like right before you're going to be coming into office and helping Trump or something. So why are you having this guy at your Thanksgiving dinner? Because I'm assuming you guys are all sitting around talking about aliens, you know? I just thought that was really interesting. You can see that on his X account. So as I was kind of going over, like, what are people's theories on the what's going on with these drones or these orbs and stuff like that. I mean, the normies, like a lot of my friends, they're just going to not pay attention. Even if I'm like, hey, you know, there's 100 mayors, I think, in New Jersey that are saying they don't trust the government and the government's lying to them. Like that seems significant to me. Like, don't you want to chat about that or ask some questions? And they're like, no, I have no questions. I have no interest. I have no curiosity. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And then the preppers, if anyone ever watches the Canadian Prepper show, he's always like, you know, World War III is going to break out any minute. So if I watch him, I start to get really petrified because he's always like, get in your bunker. You need a bunker. You know, the grid's going to go down for 5 years. You need to hunker down and have like a food source, like cooking rabbits or something. And Grok seems to imply that the government is just as clueless, like they're watching to see what happens and sending up massive and different drones as a way to distract. And then Clif High thinks that there's an alien war with bad aliens going on the moon, and that there's going to be some pandemonium and food shortages, and that the people in the cities are going to freak out if their sense of God or religion or whatever is like waking up, and they have to see like maybe their religion was created by the Roman Church and not really like valid, or you know, that can be very hard and unsettling. And then when I check in with natives, they're like, all my native friends or the people that I work with in my community are like, don't worry about it. These people have been here before. These, you know, beings have been here before. We've interacted with them throughout history. You know, our people tell the star people. And I kind of made a joke here with the TikTokers, but you know, at this point, if you go on TikTok, they're talking about thinking that the drones are spraying fog on people. Maybe they're spraying like forgetful fog that makes people forget. Like, I don't know. And I don't know what's real and what's not on TikTok. But they are also the ones originally who had talked about Alexa. I don't know if anyone had seen that on TikTok, but Alexa had supposedly warned of an armada heading to Earth of spaceships or something. People just kept asking Alexa, and it was telling them an armada was heading to Earth. So it could be that the TikTokers were onto this all before any of us. And then the New Jersey mayors that nobody's listening to, they don't believe the briefings. So I'm going to end with two things here. Maybe it's just one, but remember I said that there was the lady who reached out to me, and she had like 3 or 4 videos, and you can see it in the top screen. Like, they were like really short videos, like 13 seconds or whatever, but they were videos of the orbs in Australia that the news wasn't reporting on. And I watched them, and they just look like all the other orb videos that I had seen, like balls of light that are somewhat flexible and seem to be, I don't know, like traveling in groups together or communicating with other orbs or something. Some of them are self-replicating or making like new baby orbs. Like, you know, just these are videos that I've looked a lot at just because I'm super curious about this stuff. But she reached out to me, and I thought that this was interesting that she felt the need to reach out to me. But as I was watching her videos, I just kind of had this feeling of like, oh, I really am curious how this woman is responding to this, like on a psychic or intuitive level. Like, what is she feeling? What is she sensing? And I thought it was really interesting that she said, and this really stood out to me, she said, I feel them before I see them, and it kind of makes me look in their direction. So for me, that implies that they're almost like communicating with her. And she says, I don't feel like what I'm seeing are drones. And, drones look completely different than the orbs. And she says now that she's pointed them out, like it's like other people are like waking up to them at work also. But she doesn't feel like, and then the other thing that seemed to resonate was she talked about that it was a similar feeling that she had to what she has had in an ayahuasca session, which is a plant medicine session where often people are feeling like they're having experiences with entities, or some people report like machine elves with DMT experiences. And so my last slide here, and then we can unmute and take questions and commentary. It's a slide of the angels as they've been reported throughout history that look like these spheres that are full of eyes, for those of you that are interested in kind of like that concept. And just also emphasizing that, we don't know. We're just here to ask questions or get more info. So any questions? Or I know Cole was saying he was having a hard time getting in. I'm not sure if he ever made it. I can just go ahead and text him, but go ahead and feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you would like to talk or have a question or a thought.
I think the person you were thinking of was Danny Sheehan from the New Paradigm Group, the lawyer.
Oh, yes, that's the gentleman I was talking about.
Yeah.
Do you mind speaking again?
I think the person that you were talking about was Danny Sheehan.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm just now realizing that I could have heard probably a lot better with this. I didn't realize it was plugged in. So that's who I'm talking about. That's that gentleman that was, I thought it was very pivotal that he was at RFK Jr.'s family Thanksgiving that only had family, as he's getting ready to be part of this presidency. I thought, wow, why would they have him as their only guest that they're picturing in the social media? For me, it kind of sent a message. Like, how long has it been since the Kennedy family has been out of the White House, right? Let's just say that JFK was taken out because of alien shit, and we were told a bunch of other stuff, but really it was all about alien stuff. Well, if the Kennedy family is finally coming back to the White House, and we know that it was denied to his father, and then they're inviting like the premier UFO expert to their Thanksgiving dinner, like to be with their family as they're getting prepared to go back into the White House. I just feel like they're up to something. They're they're having conversations. So anyone else that, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself or feel free.
So, yeah, about Danny Sheehan, I don't know how many people in on this meeting are familiar with him and the work he's been doing through New Paradigm Institute. But I think he's got a cadre of about maybe 18 other lawyers that are working with him, and they are interacting with members of Congress to try to get better whistleblower protections drafted. So yeah, I donate regularly to New Paradigm Institute, and I would encourage everybody to do that because I feel like that seems to be the best sort of private citizen group going that is actually, I think, has the potential to have some influence on members of Congress. So anyway, yeah, I'm throwing that out there. Um, the other thing that I think might be worth mentioning is how many people may have seen these new posts from Stephen Greer, who has been talking about something happening between now and the time of the inauguration, where these 6 individuals who have been part of special access programs dealing with alien technology, who are apparently firsthand witnesses. Greer claims are going to come forward sometime between now and the inauguration and lay out what their involvement has been in this. And also, um, he says they're going to present irrefutable evidence that supports their claims, and that the reason that they're going to do this before the inauguration is that they want this to be one of the first things that Trump has to deal with as soon as he takes office. So I'm kind of, I mean, we hear people over the years say things that this is going to happen or that's going to happen, but I'm kind of watching that because Greer seemed to be pretty definite about it, you know.
So that resonates for me, Richard, because like I said, listening to Trump's talk that he gave, he didn't have to give that talk now. He could just wait until he becomes president. But the fact that he implies that it's almost like he's saying, they don't think you can handle it, but I think you guys can handle the truth. And the fact that that gentleman, I forget his name, but the guy you just mentioned that you give to his organization, he was at RFK Jr.'s for Thanksgiving. And then you're saying Stephen Greer is going to, that these guys are going to all come out of the closet right before the inauguration. For me, it's like setting it all up so that Trump can like be like the final cherry on the top and be like, okay, you guys, there is aliens, But I think people think that the president is like the top person who has secrets, like government secrets. But it's actually like there's like 20 people or 30 people beyond, the president. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the on UFO Disclosure Day with the new MUFON and the New Paradigm Research Group, but they had people from all over the world. It was like 2 hours worth of discussion and talk about in every country. They had representatives and I watched the whole thing. I was going to just pick little pieces here and there, but it just floored me. It was like, oh my gosh, and I'm involved in the UFO community. I'm involved with MUFON and I hear people all the time talking about different things, but that just floored me because it was just all over the world. And these are scientists, educators, people that speak all kinds of different languages that communicate back and forth with each other. Like you were talking, Richard, with Greer and Greenwood and all kinds of people that make a lot of sense and have done all kinds of scientific kinds of um, well, just everything. It's just amazing what they did, and I was really impressed by that conference.
Yeah.
So,
does anyone have any thoughts on Joe Rogan not liking Greer?
I think there's a lot of people that don't like Greer very much. Just he's a little bit abrasive, I think, for a lot of people. But I think he's been doing this for years and years and years. And he has set up a filing system that's open, completely open right now, and people can go in there and search through stuff. And if you can get past some of his abrasiveness, I think he's got some solid information.
Yeah,
So
I wonder because for me it seems like he seems to be widely respected. I mean, I've heard some criticism that like some of his stuff doesn't check out for some people or whatever, but he doesn't come up as a red flag to me like some of these folks out here that literally, I just literally think that there's people out here that are here to create chaos and confusion. And it'll be interesting to see if there is disclosure this year, which is interesting because we say disclosure, but literally other civilizations of past
it's already happened.
had disclosure. It's just
Yeah.
us that are in amnesia. So it's not. It's like disclosure for our generation, basically. But anyway, I just think it's interesting that some of these people will no longer have jobs, like the ones that were here to spread information and disinformation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with, I've spent a little bit of time with Stephen Greer, and he is a fairly egotistical man, but you can't deny all that he's done over, basically since
Oh, his life.
to move this
Mhm.
whole thing forward. And I would say that he was instrumental in my sort of beginning to take all of this seriously years ago. So I think the work that he's done and the perseverance that he has shown through all of this has been remarkable, really. And probably only a person with a big ego could actually withstand all of the, criticism that he's had to deal with the naysayers and the debunkers. And so I have a lot of respect for Stephen Greer, and I wish him well. And I hope, this heads up that he's given us about this coming event is actually going to come to fruition.
Well,
Yeah.
it seems like the signs are there. I think the signs are lining up. When Joe Rogan took time out of his day to put Stephen Greer down, this was, I forget, maybe 6 months ago, 5 months ago. That was when I started to pay more attention to Mr. Greer, because I was like, why is he going out of his way to put him down on national like television, you know? Like for me, that rose my suspicions, because
Mhm.
Joe Rogan will give lots of people an opportunity to talk about aliens or talk about UFOs. So why, what, for me, there's other people, Corey Goodman and others that I think are, whatever. So it's just interesting to me that he was choosing to put him down, because for me, I'm like, wow, and you could
Yeah.
give this guy a platform. Is this guy a threat in some way? Because, there's always the question of controlled opposition. So we think that sometimes our leaders in the
Mhm.
UFO movement might not be leaders, because even Joe Rogan, even though he has all these people for UFO talks, he still says he's on the fence about UFOs after like 20 years of interviews. So you just have to ask yourself, what does he have against
Yeah.
Stephen Greer? I did watch an interview with David Wilcock. Is that his name, Wilcox?
Yeah.
And he had an interview that I thought was interesting, where he said that we now have the technology. I don't know if this is BS. I don't know if anyone's a fan of David, but I've heard that he's like an agent to create chaos or all kinds of things. But he literally said that there was a spaceship in outer orbit that had the capacity to control humans, or to keep them kind of dimmed down in their consciousness or something, and that we now have the technology to shoot that out of the sky or destroy it or something. And he said the problem is that people will upgrade very quickly and they won't understand their powers, like maybe they can move through walls, or I don't know, it just was kind of out there. But I thought, well, I wonder if there's a grain of truth. Sometimes I feel like there's a grain of truth in the things that these people talk about. And if you want to go down this rabbit hole, I think it's very fascinating. WikiLeaks, if you ever want to go down that rabbit hole, actually had a reference to like UFO stuff back when they did like the Clinton email drop or whatever. So you have to sort through like lots of the WikiLeaks. There were so many emails that were dumped. But I thought it fascinating that like everyone else seized on all these salacious pieces of gossip and things that had to do with like trafficking, or things that they had to do with occultic, cults in the underground, and sick depravity or whatever. But no one seemed to focus. It was almost like we have amnesia over certain words in our population, because no one seemed to focus on. It sounded like disclosure if you dug through the Wikipedia, not Wikipedia,
WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks. Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts or?
No, you're always a wild woman with your information, Leo.
Oh,
You've got
really?
quite the brain.
Well, I tried to do my simulation theory.
Appreciate.
Thank you. I tried to do my simulation theory talk twice for you guys, and I just feel like it would kind of, I failed, but
No, you're really great.
but
And
I
Kathleen, I was on for the World Disclosure Day to that big event, and I'm looking forward in April going to Albuquerque for, I think it's called the Alien Exploration Conference that Bertie is hosting,
Good.
who's the MUFON state director. So, and that is all of like, I think Danny Sheehan's group.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
all who's presenting.
What month is that? Carol?
That's the beginning of April in Albuquerque.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool.
so is any, yeah, go ahead.
Could I just interject here. If people, there's a book written by a man named Paul Hill, he worked at NASA before NASA became NASA, when it was called NACA. And he was an engineer, and he had his own UFO sighting. And after that, he sort of became NASA's go-to guy for people within NASA who didn't want to really talk openly about their own UFO experiences, but they would seek out Paul Hill, and he began collecting data from all of these people that would come to him within NASA, talking with him about their UFO encounters or sightings. And he began to, just jot down little tidbits of information as time went on. And then he wrote this book, and it's a pretty dense book as far as physics is concerned. But the conclusion that he came to was that these disc-shaped UFOs will always be surrounded by a plasma. That when you see a glowing plasma, it doesn't mean that it's ball lightning or just some free-floating sustained plasma, however that would even happen. But he said that because of the way that they're shaped, that around the edges, they come to a pretty sharp edge, and around that edge creates a great deal of very high voltage and creates a plasma around the craft, and that's how we see them. So when people ask, well, how come nobody ever gets a great photo of a UFO? He said, because they're surrounded by these plasmas. And I wish I could remember the title of his book, but if you look it up, his name was Paul Hill, and his book is basically about the physics of UFOs.
I just, oh shoot, I really wanted to show that video of the airplane, the orbs from the airplane. I'm not sure if anyone saw that. But anyway, it may be that, people can just go look for that on their own.
Do you have snow, Dr. O'Connor?
I'm sorry?
Do you have snow?
Yes. In fact, it's snowing right now.
Is it?
Yeah. We probably gotten, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 inches today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's kind of problematic for me to keep the library open in the winter because all I have to plow the driveway, which is a pretty long driveway, is a little ATV with a blade on it, so it takes quite a long time for me to get rid of enough snow where people don't come down here and then get stuck, So probably we'll pick up again with the library like in April or early May.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Shane, for joining. So we're talking about the UFOs and disclosure and the orbs that people have been seeing. I wanted to share this video, but I don't know if anyone else can share if I allow multiple participants to share. But I'm pulling it up in another screen, but I'm not somehow getting it to this one. But I'll go ahead and put it in the chat. So if someone else is able to share their screen, they might be able to click on it and show. And unfortunately, oh, here it is. So this was like 3 orbs. I don't know if anyone can just share that video. Multiple participants can share their screen, but if anyone can click on that video, I don't know. I wonder if people have like a spiritual reaction to the orbs, right? Like, I don't know how many of you are on TikTok or X, but there are literally people, I almost want to say starting new religions. I'm kind of exaggerating here, but like about these orbs as if they are their own like star people, like, you know, like a consciousness that we can't necessarily understand. You know, something like far beyond us. I don't know if anyone can, if maybe I can just go to it, but I don't think so.
You know, relative to orbs, I just finished yesterday reading a book called The Paranormal Ranger, and it's written by Stanley Milford, who was a police officer on the Navajo reservation down in Arizona and New Mexico. And he wrote this book, and you know, he comes across as being an extremely sincere, honest individual who went into police work really because of a very intense desire to help people and to forward the cause of justice. And in the book, one of the things that he describes is taking a photograph. And I've heard other people talk about taking photographs and seeing like hundreds of these orbs. But he described in the book taking a photograph that had, when he looked at the photo, it had hundreds of orbs in the picture. And when he expanded these up, he said that he saw what appeared to be human faces in every one of these orbs. And he made a point of saying that this was not a case of, you know, what they call pareidolia, where you imagine that you see Jesus in a piece of toast, you know. He said these were very distinct images of human faces in each one of these orbs in this photograph. So I don't know.
So I've heard that theory before, though, that people see the orbs that show up in photographs, but often they're like momentous occasions, like a marriage or like some kind of ceremony or a birth. Like maybe it's your grandmother or your great grandmother that wanted to be there to see her great granddaughter be born, or to see her daughter get married or something. And it could be that the orbs in the sky are also humans that have evolved to a different level. You know what I mean? Who are we to understand what, you know, what heaven is, or, you know, what. So I just think if you took the orb theory to, like you're saying, that that's a human, that's a soul, then in Judaism, they believe that at the end of times, whatever that means, that the dead will rise, which is a really famous contested, like, what does that really mean? The dead will rise. Like, is your grandpa going to get up out of his coffin? Like, what's going to happen? And so as you're talking about these orbs, right, meaning a soul that is connected to the people in the picture, I'm like, oh, maybe we are at the end of times, because Terence McKenna had this theory that we're like the circle spiraling and we're getting more and more compressed, and now we're at the epoch. So maybe, I don't know. And then you have Elon Musk putting out a Twitter statement that said we're having an upgrade, and people don't understand that, like, we're in a simulation or we're in a matrix and we're having an upgrade. Like, basically what I felt like he was saying is the people that are in control are really not in control. That's what.
Yeah, I can say one thing, you know, we keep talking about people that are famous and are all over the place, but you turn right to your neighbor or some of the people that are in MUFON, like Carol, you remember Penny. Penny gave some great presentation on orbs and wrote a book on it, and she's gone out and in the woods and taken pictures and sees the same thing, sees faces in there, and she is also heavily into Sasquatch, so she's got lots of different things going on. But I think that's just an ordinary person, you know, that you meet on the street. And I think there are more people that have more things going on with them that are unusual that makes it usual, I guess. You know, they're just afraid to talk to him because we've been brainwashed for years.
Yeah.
But does that lady
Yeah.
say that they're spirits? Does that lady think that the orbs are spirits, like human?
She thinks they're all kinds of different things. So, I
Okay.
mean, she thinks when her dog passed that she saw an orb of her dog.
Yep.
And it was just like right when that happened. The
Right.
same with, you know, seeing a Sasquatch in an orb, and maybe that's how they move. Or maybe that's, you know, it's really open. You know, you really have to be open-minded to try and not put something in a funnel. I mean, because I don't think we're
Mhm.
smart enough to understand the whole thing. It's too complicated and too layered and too many
No, no, and
multiple
that's what
moving
Terrence McKenna said. He said we don't even have the capability or the imagination to really
right.
understand.
Yeah.
So how do you guys feel about, you guys are on the cutting edge of like the UFO movement or whatever, like, so what happens if people have disclosure this year and they lose their religions? You know, I don't know if you guys saw, but the Vatican came out with like new rules for apparitions and new rules for how people are going to have to deal with spirits or entities. I thought this was very interesting timing. This was about like a year ago, but the Vatican came out with new rules for how to deal with like ghosts or ghostly apparitions. And I was like, well, this is weird. Like, why are they giving an update?
The Catholic Church got ahead of this a long time ago. I think it might have been Pope Francis or something when he was perhaps asked, but I know he said something to the effect like, "Well, if there are aliens, you know, God made them too," and I would,
Yep.
you know, whatever, you know.
Yep.
So, and I think, I'm sorry, I think Kathleen is so right, and I think that's what makes this quote unquote UFO or UAP topic so hard for people is because once you get in, then shit gets very weird, and then
Right.
you have to continually open your mind more and more, and you constantly have to check and be like, wait, can this fucking be real or can this be a possibility? And it continues to expand,
Yeah.
which is so apropos because this phenomenon is so expansive and we just can't even conceive of it. And so what's happened now is the government for 80 some years, rather than saying like there is this thing, we don't know what it is, like clearly it hasn't harmed us, it's been here forever, but like rather than tell us that, they're like trying to take the tech instead and also worry that the dumb little, you know, public cannot handle this when already 50% of the public believes that there's other life forms out there. So I think again, that's what really angers me about this whole topic is that the government trying to like quarantine this information and the rest of us are out here and we sort of, well, quote unquote know about it, you know, but then, you know, I've been posting about it recently because I see this as an opportunity to educate people, to bring them into the fold, to give them some good information, not the super crazy shit, at least not right away, you know, sort of ease them into this because this has happened time and time again, these UFO flaps. It's happened time and time and time
Mhm.
again. And it's so well documented. And the only thing that has changed now is that everybody's filming it. And then worse is like all the idiots are seeing every single falling star or meteorite or whatever and saying it's a UFO. So things are getting very fuzzy, but we do have an opportunity here. And I'll just say quickly before I mute myself that the military is already capitalizing on this. Obviously, we have technology to take down drones instantly, and this would not be tolerated if it were China, Russia, Iran, whatever, right? So that sort of seems so clear on its face, and yet people, I think, are still to some degree taking like the information or whatever bullshit that the Pentagon gives us, you know, and it's also complicated because many people in Congress and in the government don't know. So we can say like the government's not telling us, you know, but it's so compartmentalized. So this thing
Right.
is so vast that if you're just now getting into it, it's like a lot all at once.
Right.
But I think there's an opportunity here.
But Shane, before you mute yourself, do you feel like I'm not trying to give you an ego trip, but do you feel like those of us who are like attuned to this and we're like, oh, you know, life could be stranger than reality, that maybe you have a special purpose? I'm not trying to like, you know, give you a big ego trip or any of us a big ego trip, but like, what is your purpose? Why are you here? And if you are someone that's always been like if you saw something you would communicate with it spiritually or like an animal, or like maybe you communicate with orbs, or maybe you have ESP or clairvoyant dreams or prophetic dreams, like how, like, don't you feel like people are going to freak out if they're so stupid, for lack of a better word, and they can't come to the same deduction that you just came to, which is
Mm-hmm.
clearly if it was Russia or China, we'd probably shoot it out of the sky.
I mean, I do feel a responsibility here, and I have experienced other things. Most of the time, I don't share with people because people aren't ready. So I keep it to myself, knowing, you know, knowing full well, what I know, but I do feel a sense of responsibility here. And you're sort of asking like, what are you doing here? What's your purpose? And it sort of goes back to the thing that I do with the medicine service and with helping people get their lives back, because I think everybody has this gift, this ability to be able to tap into these things. And the problem is that there's so many things, right? So somebody might tap into one thing but not the other, and vice versa, because these are all just variations on the spectrum of consciousness, and we think we're the pinnacle of consciousness and we're the top dog here, but like there's just other things outside the realms that we can perceive of, and like there's a whole wider spectrum to this consciousness thing that we just cannot perceive. And I think they either allow themselves to be seen or can come in and out or whatever. But yeah, I feel a responsibility here because I think everybody has the gifts in them to be able to tap into this thing. And so I think that's how we raise humanity. I think that's how we evolve, for lack of a better word.
I think everyone that's on here is basically here in service. Everybody is on their own learning path, and some things are similar in experience to what other people have, but it's such a personal phenomenon, wherever you are on the spectrum and whatever experiences that you've had. And it's also, to me, very personal too. I mean, some people share very easily what their experiences have been, and other people are more private about their experiences. And there's just like Shane said, there's just a vast number of experiences and topics. And, it's not like we have black and white answers or black and white experts on, a lot of the topics. So I think we're all here in service.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a spiritual component, because I think some of us, like when you talk to Native people and they're like, some of these people have been our friends since we've known that we existed, and go back generations, and we weren't scared of them, or they came and visited us around the fire or whatever. And I feel like we have such an antagonistic perspective that I'm concerned that people will struggle with acceptance, right? Like la 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 la, they just want to stay in their bubble, right? And so it's going to be hard to have the discussion with them of like, see that big craft over your house, like that actually, the big orb or whatever, maybe it's trying to communicate with you. But what Shane said about how they want to show themselves, like I feel like they're being more transparent. They're showing themselves more right now. So maybe like they're moving up the game, you know what I mean? I don't know how much we ever were in control. Like I get it that there might have been some UFO alien species that we made contracts with Eisenhower or whatever. If you follow Laura Eisenhower, and she talks about Eisenhower having made contracts with certain aliens and stuff like that. But it could be that in my mind, the orbs are like far beyond all the aliens or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like a whole other, you know what I mean? That there's different tiers or so just, it could be a whole different kind of technology that we don't understand, because one thing that stands out to me about the orbs is that they're not a craft. When I'm studying the drones, it looks like a craft, like a human made craft or something, like a craft made by something. But the orbs seem like an organic sentient creature that flexes and moves like it's sentient.
But I think some people, I go back to like Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I mean, maybe it is a personal craft. Maybe, I mean, some people believe that the Bigfoot transport and, from an orb, come into visibility.
Right.
But maybe it is a personal craft or a spirit personal craft.
A spirit personal craft, like a spirit personal car or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, my mind's blown.
Even the orb, even just the orb topic is varied too, because then you have like these plasma type orbs, right? That you say like shapeshift. And I've seen some really beautiful images of some alleged UAP that are like, they look like angels. They're just like these long wispy things and they're morphing and shifting. And I watch the video and I go like, I want to believe it's real. And like, it makes sense that they wrote about angels and stuff, but I don't know if this video is real. But again, once you get in, like, I don't think you can, poo-poo anything. But even the orbs is a wide topic because you have like the plasmatic orbs or the shape-shifting orbs or just the energetic orbs. And then you have like small, like metallic balls, like literal metal
Mhm.
orbs that, they used to see in World War II, the Foo Fighters or whatever, because those weren't huge things. These were smaller, but metallic looking
Mhm.
orbs. So even just the orb subject is, so vast. And so again, for anybody just getting into this thing now, and it's sort of like, to me, I'm trying to figure out how I can take this opportunity that we've been given to sort of like disseminate information for those who are willing or able to hear without looking crazy, Yeah, and so any advice anybody has on that, I would love.
Well, I mean,
And I think Penny is presenting next Wednesday, I think. Mary, do you know? I think on Orbs, Penny Rummel is presenting on Orbs, possibly next Wednesday or the following Wednesday,
Wonderful.
too.
I think it was the 15th. Does that sound right?
She's the 15th.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Shane, I don't know if I have any answers other than we were talking about how RFK Jr.'s only Thanksgiving guest was the guy who he's like the biggest UFO lobbyist in Washington, and he was featured at RFK Jr.'s family dinner for Thanksgiving, and the only non-family guest. So I would have paid money to have sat around that Thanksgiving meal and really enjoyed all the talk. But
Who was that?
Richard, can you remind me of his name again?
Sheehan, Danny Sheehan.
Yeah,
Danny
of
Sheehan.
course, yeah. Yeah, he's been deep in this for decades.
Right, but they could have
Yeah.
chosen anyone for their family dinner. So to have him as a guest, and also
Heck yeah.
Donald Trump had done a press conference where he literally had said that they know what these orbs are, but that the U.S. government is choosing not to tell you.
Mhm.
So it could be that
I saw that.
he's the disclosure president. And then I think it was Richard who mentioned that Stephen Greer had said that a bunch more whistleblowers are going to come forward before the inauguration. So it could be that those of us who are open and into X-Files and all that good stuff and believe that Roswell, is more than just a weather balloon or whatever, that we're going to have our day in the sun here in a minute when our normie friends say, "Hey, I know you're into that UFO stuff. Do you mind like talking to me?" So,
Look, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I saw that little brief press conference that he gave. I hope the military industrial complex and the money doesn't get a hold of him once he gets in there, because you know how those things go. But yeah, I feel like I was gonna say something else and I forgot. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. But
so
I
I
hope he
had
does. I
I
hope. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. I've been here before. I've had my hopes up before. Like when David Grush gave his testimony before Congress, it was like, how the fuck do they? He just said non-human intelligence. He said pilots. You know what I mean? Like, how do they not? And it was just like gone. It was just gone. So like, as far as like my hopes are concerned, of course I'm always optimistic, but this is where I turn into the biggest skeptic. So I'm hopeful, and that's why I just want to like try to do my part. But I hope they disclose or get us closer. Anyways, sorry.
yeah. Well, let's pray for that. Thank you so much, everyone. I don't have any other questions. Did anyone else want to say anything to end our time together? But hopefully we can gather together again sometime.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say one other thing. Just because of the primary reason that I got involved in all of this years ago was because you mentioned Roswell, and Jesse Marcel Jr. was an ear, nose, and throat physician here in Helena, Montana, where I live. And he and I worked in the operating rooms of St. Peter's Hospital for, well, I knew him for 27 years before he passed away. And we had a lot of discussions about Roswell. And he was there and he handled the material that his father told the world was not, a flying saucer that was not of this earth. And I just want to reassure everybody, because of my personal interactions and friendship really with Dr. Marcel, that man was as straight up and honest and honorable of a person that you will ever meet. And whatever he said, you can take it to the bank. So I'm sure nobody here in this group probably doubts that Roswell happened, and what it was. but I can just tell you, from the interactions that I had and my sort of close relationship with Dr. Marcel, that Roswell happened, and it was the recovery of a UFO, and I'm quite certain of that after the discussions that I had with him. So just throwing that out there.
Thanks for sharing.
Have you had any experience with the CIA releasing some like documents that had to do with an interview with an alien named EBE? I don't know, but they supposedly, I've just seen people cover the interview with the alien EB, but it sounded legit to me. I don't know if anyone else had any experience with that, but one thing that stood out to me was EB said to like the military man that was very rude and just kind of like aggressive and like, why are you coming for us? Like, do you have any plans to overtake the earth and all this stuff? And I just felt like EB was patiently answering like you would to like a small child, like, no, we're not here to take you over, and no, we've been here many times before, and that. But one thing that really stood out to me that was very poignant was EB the alien supposedly said in these CIA like released documents that he said that trees and children matter so much, and that's what really is very special about this planet. And that was something that like basically the aliens from his perspective were kind of horrified that we didn't do better taking care of trees and like the spirits of trees or whatever, recognizing how special they are in children. And I was like,
yeah, I read some of that too, and I think that that was sort of a feminine presence with that EB, but she would talk to the nurse because the nurse was much more calm and reassuring and
respectful.
Comforting. Yeah.
No, there was something about that interview that even if people tell me later that interview was just completely made up and the CIA just released it for no reason whatsoever, it just really struck my curiosity because it just seemed like something an alien would say, like trees and children are really nice. You guys like if you ever read The Little Prince, it was like the conversation that the little prince would have with like the flower, the rose flower, like I don't know. So,
you know what else? I mean, that was the early 50s, which was 70 years ago. And you just made me think, Leo, I mean, how many more aliens have they had in captivity in the last 70 years? How many are in captivity right now?
Right.
And they'll talk about the one in, the early 50s.
Yeah.
But I mean, myself, I never think about how many have they got stored away.
Right.
Currently.
There was a guy that went to Area 51 and he was like a YouTuber. I don't know if anyone has heard about him, but he disappeared, but he went onto like the land and was mucking around. And, I just feel like there's a lot of secrets there. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, what you just spoke about was kind of the message that was given to the children at the aerial school.
Yeah.
When they talked about, taking better care of the environment, and, they present these aliens presented themselves to these children at that school and at the Westall School in Australia as well. So they do seem to have a predilection for interacting with children.
But I think children are so open and they have imaginations still. Their imaginations are not shut off. So.
Well, and I think also in touching the children, they know they're planting a seed for the future, because us ding dongs are already blowing it. But if they get to the kids, they might be able to change things slowly over time.
I never thought about that strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Guys, appreciate
Have a great night. Peace to everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.